What it do, bruh? Talk of the town, Nintendo, Doc Trey still holding it down, still make the best games, and you know this, bro. It's the truth. If you don't like it, you can have that seatbelt. Alright, so I promise that this is not becoming a TV channel. I just had to get this video out there because something's going on that's really getting on my nerves. So, kind of like what happened in gaming a couple generations ago with everybody using raw polygon count to determine how good games were going to look and what was more powerful for a system. Similar thing is going on right now with TVs with the amount of local dimming zones. So what's getting lost in the shuffle here is people forgetting what local dimming is for. People are getting so caught up with how many zones the TV has and all this stuff, and they're forgetting why local dimming is there in the first place. Now, this doesn't concern OLEDs because OLEDs don't need local dimming because they can pretty much dim their pixels at a pixel level. They don't need local dimming. So local dimming is a straight LCD LED thing. I also want to point out that the TVs that have a extra wide viewing layer for better side viewing on the TVs, there's actually an extra layer on the screen that makes the viewing angles better, but it also affects the contrast in a negative way. So those TVs would actually need more zones. The Sony X900H does not have that wide angle viewing feature, which is why the native contrast of the TV, despite not having any more zones, has a higher native contrast than the more expensive Sony X950H. Now, the whole point of local dimming is to improve the perceived contrast of the TV. That's the whole point. And it seems that people are forgetting that. Now, with the Sony X900H that I purchased, it has a low amount of dimming zones, but I knew that already. The 950H, which is considered a higher end TV than this TV, I think itself only had 32 local dimming zones. So I knew off the bat that this TV wasn't going to have a lot of local dimming zones. Now, it's been found that the 75-inch version of this TV also only has 32 local dimming zones, right? Which is very small, especially for a TV that large, because usually the larger the TV, the more dimming zones they have to make up for the size difference, which means that the 55-inch that I have more than likely has even less dimming zones than that. I think Caleb Dennison said that when he counted the TV, even with the 65-inch that he was using, I don't know if he was using the 65 or the 55, but he said he only counted about 16 zones. So the 55-inch version of this TV has as low as 16 local dimming zones and as much as 32, right? But if it only has 16, that actually makes my point even better on this TV. So like I told you guys before, the whole purpose of local dimming was to increase the perceived contrast of the TV, right? So the TV has what's called a native contrast, and then local dimming is used to boost that perceived contrast. Now, you guys are claiming that, it has to have a bunch of local dimming zones, right? Well, let's see about that. So, the Sony TV only has 32 or less local dimming zones, right? The native contrast of this TV is excellent. It's 4,267 to 1. The contrast with local dimming boosts it up to 4,786 to 1, right? Which actually isn't that big of an increase after the local dimming, but that's probably because there's not a lot of local dimming zones. Now, let's take the Samsung Q80T, which costs significantly more money than this Sony. All right. This has a native contrast of 3042 to 1. And with local dimming, the contrast is 4225 to 1. The Q80T has 50 local dimming zones. 50. The Sony TV has as low as 16 with the 55-inch. Yet, the native contrast of the Sony is higher than the Samsung even after it has their local dimming on. The Sony has a higher native contrast with local dimming off than the Samsung's contrast with local dimming on high with more local dimming units or zones than the Sony. Let's look at the Samsung Q70T. The Samsung Q70T actually has a higher native contrast than both of those TVs with 7,144 to 1 and doesn't have local dimming at all. So the TV that's under the Samsung 80T actually has a higher native contrast than the 80T, and it doesn't even have local dimming at all. Interesting, right? Look, the amount of local dimming zones alone does not matter. What matters is all the other factors that go into it, along with the application of the local dimming. You can have a bunch of zones all you want. If they don't perform well, or if it's poorly implemented, it doesn't mean anything.